Alex, good to see you again. Congrats on the book. I always wonder what's the next breaking. It's like Bill O'Reilly has
Yeah.
killing, and then you fill in the blank. What's breaking now? It's now breaking the law. Congrats on the book. It's been out a week, I guess, right?
Yeah, almost a week, and thanks, Sean. It's I don't have a lot of great ideas. It's interesting because Breaking the News, my first book, that was a no brainer because the news media was getting broken because the establishment media became worthless. You witnessed this firsthand behind the podium, but it was watching that happen, and also the play on breaking news, as in we report news original at Breitbart that others don't get. I thought that was kind of cool. And then Breaking Biden, which was my second book, I think it just kind of worked for people in more of a poetry sense. That was a little harder to define what that's about, but I pitched that around as not my favorite of the titles that I had for my idea of doing a Biden takedown. No one on the right had done a big comprehensive takedown of Joe Biden. I thought someone should do that because he could win again, and maybe a third term, maybe a fourth term. Who knows? Guy's crazy. And that was the title that everyone liked. And then Breaking the Law was a no-brainer because lawfare is the new, I would say, the most powerful way of fighting back against MAGA from the resistance crowd. It's no longer Hollywood. It's no longer the establishment media. It is no longer academia. It really is the lawfare against President Trump and his supporters. It's been the most effective tool against the MAGA agenda. So Breaking the Law, there it is. But I don't know what's next. Breaking the Huddle? Maybe I'll write a sports book.
Oh, that's actually interesting. All right, we're gonna have to brainstorm. Maybe we can crowdsource the next Alex Marlow book title. So let's break down a lot of what's in the book. But as you know, this morning, President Trump came out talking about the law in D.C. And the funny part about this, Alex, is that I don't think someone said to me, "Is this a distraction or whatever?" I go, he's been talking about D.C. and crime since the first term, and when he drives around, I think he sees stuff in D.C. Graffiti, homelessness. He obviously anecdotally hears stories about crime and says this is disgusting for our nation's capital. What do you think about his take on this?
Yeah, I love it. Trump, I think, operates in two modes that are, I think, convergent here. The first thing is he just likes to do stuff. He likes to rack up wins because that controls the media narrative. He's a high energy guy, obviously. Anyway, I remember you telling me about your schedule and your press secretary. It sounded pretty grueling. But he knows that this controls the media narrative. So they're reacting to him and not the other way around. So that's very effective. And when he comes up with little ways to notch a W quickly, he's always going to take them. It seems like his approach. And I love that approach. But there's this problem in all of our cities, and I write about this in great detail in Breaking the Law, how a guy named George Soros, familiar to everyone in your audience, has bought up all of these DAs, et cetera, across the country, so that most of our major cities are crime-ridden. They're trying to let all the criminals off the hook and out of jail. They're getting filthier. They're somehow getting more expensive, somehow at the same time. They're terrible places in general, going in the wrong direction. So there's one city on earth where Trump can directly make a difference immediately, and that's DC. The laws are on the books to allow him to do that. And considering this is our nation's capital, this is conceivably one of our most beautiful cities, a place with our history, a place that represents America to the rest of the world, like it or not, and he can do something about it, I absolutely love it. It's pure Trumpian, and I can't wait to see what he does.
Sorry to jump in on this video, but if you're thinking about a great dinner, I've got the perfect solution for you. Riverbend Ranch steaks. They are absolutely amazing. You cannot get these in grocery stores. And frankly, they're better than anything you can get in a steakhouse. Go to riverbendranch.com. Use code Sean for $20 off your first order. riverbendranch.com. For your first order, use code Sean. And by the way, the hot dogs, the beef jerky, everything else is phenomenal. From the ranch to your table, riverbendranch.com. Use code Sean. Okay, I got two more questions on DC, and then I want to get to the broader concept of lawfare. So I said this on the morning meeting this morning on the show that I do on YouTube with Mark Halpern and whatever. This to me is an opportunity. To your point, this is one area where Trump can do something directly in a city because it's not part of a state. It is the federal District of Columbia. But here's my broader point, Alex. This is a moment for Republicans to actually think way ahead. The Dems want to make D.C. a state, not because of voting rights, but because they want 2 additional Democratic senators for life. Okay, so here's my point, and I've been saying this for at least 5 or 6 years. When D.C. was created in the 1700s, they took parts of Virginia, parts of Maryland, created a perfect 10 mile by 10 mile square. In 1846, they gave back the Virginia part, Arlington County, Arlington and Alexandria, to Virginia without going down a rabbit hole. Bottom line is, so now what I would argue is if you really want to do something, Mr. President, carve out a federal district from the Lincoln Memorial to the Supreme Court and obviously around the White House and give everything back to Maryland. And then this crime issue would be Maryland's. The voting issue would be solved. Dems would couldn't say that they couldn't address the issue of voting rights. And you take two additional Democrats off. That to me is playing chess, not checkers.
So would this include parts of Virginia?
No, Virginia was already given back in 1846. So if you look at D.C. right now, it's not a perfect square. It looks right. Okay. But that's because Arlington County, the contribution of Virginia was given back. So my point is give back to Maryland everything but the National Mall so you still maintain what the framers wanted. So the framers said you had to have a federal district that was part of no state. So you carve out the National Mall, the White House, all the way past the Capitol and the Supreme Court. That's your federal district. It keeps the framers' intent intact and then gives back to Maryland, which was taken from Maryland. Therefore, the Democrats can't claim that voting isn't an issue anymore. Now they're part of a state as they used to be, and the issue is solved, and we take two additional Dem senators off the table.
Okay, I got a comment. I got an outside the box idea, but then I got a question back to you. So my comment is, in general, I think that there's no neutral body that can draw things. We're just not there as a society. There's no council of elders. The left would want, the New York Times editorial board to draw up any district. So if you win elections and you can change stuff, I think you're obliged to change stuff to benefit your voter base. So if that's what's happening here, I'm way good with that, and I think that that's just the way it works now in modern America. So I support your thinking, big league. Maybe even take it a step further and give those parts of Arlington County back to DC so that then Virginia could be more red. So all those blue counties that are making Virginia a purple state, which it shouldn't be. Most of Virginia is just salt of the earth Republicans, but it's you know what?
If I didn't live in Alexandria, I would agree with you. All right, here's my second question, though.
No, but I got to ask a question, though. Is it legal, though? Can you actually pull it off? Because if you can,
100%. No. Again, I just want to be clear on the history of this. In 1791, D.C. was created, and they took part of Virginia, part of Maryland, and created a 10 by 10 square box. Yeah. And then what happened was, again, I could go down a rabbit hole on this, but the bottom line is Alexandria in particular felt slighted, and there was a slavery issue, just to put that on the table, that they wanted to maintain the slave trade, plus they thought they were being ignored. So Congress in 1846 said, fine, we'll give back all of the Virginia contribution to Virginia. That's now present day Arlington and Alexandria at Reagan National Airport. If you've ever flown in, you're actually landing in Virginia. But they gave it all back and said, fine, you take it back. Now all that exists is the Maryland contribution. And my point is the framers said we want a federal district. So you take that of which just government houses, i.e. the White House, the National Mall, and the Smithsonian, and Congress, and the Supreme Court, carve it out, take out all the residential aspects of it, and give everything back to Maryland. 100% legal. It's already, the precedent, that's my point, is the part of Virginia already was given back. So do that and get ahead of the Dems, because Beto O'Rourke, and all of these guys are out there, James Carville, saying we've got to make D.C. a state.
Yeah, they've been saying that. It's not going to happen. I don't think that. It could if they get more power politically, but they don't have the. We're a ways off.
No, not yet. But that's my point is get ahead of the game, play chess. All right, here's my second issue on DC, and this kind of I think gets to your book. This weekend, there's a leftist named Kara Swisher. She was on CNN saying that all of this talk about crime in DC is a right-wing talking point. And my point is, first of all it takes is walking down the street in D.C., Navy Yard, where the stadium is, and you see how many people are getting carjacked and gangs running wild. And what I believe has happened is that when you go talk to a cop these days, they've decriminalized a lot of stuff. They won't go after anybody anymore. The Dems have basically created a system where cops don't prosecute. Your point about Soros, they let all these guys off the hook. So the statistics look better. But the reality is that if you go talk to an average cop in DC and you say, why are you guys just allowing that gang to run ramshot down the road? It's because, well, we're not going to prosecute them anymore. They're going to get let off. So what's happened is the statistics look better in terms of crime in a lot of major cities. But the reality is if you talk to people on the ground, because of Soros-funded district attorneys and the handcuffing that we've put cops under, that it's not really what's happening. The statistics are manipulated.
This is it. So this is an important point, and it's a point I make very early on in the book, is that the goal would be if you prosecute more, which would actually reduce crime, it will lead to a drastic statistical uptick in crime in the short term, which would make the ruling class look bad. And that's the vicious circle that we're in these cities, because they're one-party states, or they're one-party, cities for the most part. There's almost no Republican presence in any of our major cities. There's only a handful of the top 25 most populous cities have any Republican presence at all. So, which means that if any Democrat just says, all right, we got to do it, we got to take on crime, and let the chips fall where they may, it's going to look like there's more crime immediately just by the virtue of them prosecuting and the data going up. And that's something that they're not going to do, because they're going to think it looks bad politically. So thus the cities will fester.
Exactly. And that's what they've done, is tried to manipulate the data. But I don't think the average person knows that, right? I don't think that when you start hearing about these Soros-funded prosecutors, and what do you think the ultimate goal is? Like, I still have yet to understand. Like, so Soros comes in, funds all this stuff. Is it that they want a more leftist world? I mean, because I would argue, or I would think to myself, regardless of where I am on the political spectrum, even if I'm the craziest leftist in the world, why would I want more crime in my city? Why would I want a prosecutor that's letting everybody off?
Yeah, I don't think it really affects them, to the real plutocratic elite who control the Democrat Party, and that is who is controlling the party. And I go into a lot of detail of who funds the Lawfare in Breaking the Law. And it's a lot of names that are familiar to you, a lot of them who are not familiar to you, but these are people who do not relate to the world like the rest of us. These are people who are truly at a elite anointed status, and they're free from having to deal with most of the burdens of day-to-day crime that the rest of us are. So I think that's part of it. But to answer your question, there's two things that they're looking for here. And I don't know if you draw up a pie chart, what is a bigger percentage than which. But the obvious one is Democrat rule. These people are committed leftists, and the shoplifter vote is very powerful in the Democrat Party, particularly in major elections, not just the down ticket races, but in the big elections. The lower income people and people who have criminal records and things like that, these are all people who vote Democrat. So it's pandering for votes, and they want to stay in power. They find political power to be the most important thing in their life, more important than family, more important than faith, more important than their jobs. It is political power. That's what they're going for. And this is an easy way to get it. The other thing is, I think that some of the really bad actors here, the Soroses of the world, I do think they want chaos. I think they like the idea of a chaotic society. They don't like the idea of a conservative, organized society. There's lots of different rationales for why this is the case, but they are looking to undermine America's core principles with that.
Don't you think that's funny, though? I mean, not funny. It's probably sad. But your point on power, I don't think can be overstated. That I keep reminding people, if you listen to Carville in the clip I played last week on the show, or Beto O'Rourke this weekend, everything that they do is in pursuit of power. So on the census, they want illegals to be counted because it gives them more representation. On the case of this law, like, it all comes back to, how do you get and maintain power for the sake of power? And that's, to me, just a dynamic that people need to be completely aware of, is that, I gave you my DC example. They use the cover of, we want people to have the right to vote. But it's really not, because I have a very simple, if you really want them, then the easy answer is take what was from Maryland back and give it back to Maryland. That's the easy answer, right? Instead of creating a new state of 400,000 people in DC, but it's never about what they say it is, right? It's not about that. It's always about the pursuit of power. And I think in the legal world, it's the same thing.
That's exactly right. And let me give you a clear example that'll hit close to home for this audience. I write in the book that the left hates democracy. And so they're the ones who are the alleged stewards of democracy. And they're the ones who keep telling us that we're undemocratic because we like Donald Trump. But this is just classic Saul Alinsky, where you take your worst trait and then you accuse your opponents of having that trait because it neutralizes their attacks on you. Think about the way they handled the 2016 election. They tried to nullify it with the Russia collusion hoax. Obviously, a lot of people have a lot of doubts about the way the 2020 election was conducted. Now, I think some of the cheating that took place might not be the same as some of you in the audience, but I'll tell you, Joe Biden getting 80 plus million votes. I mean, come on, it's a crazy stat. And then as I walk through, 2024 was the most blatant attempt to rig an election in the history of the republic. The lawfare apparatus, the superstructure, was trying to jail the standard bearer of a major political party, trying to bankrupt him. And the elite of the Democrat Party were paying for it to happen. And everyone was going to Joe Biden's White House for visits the whole time to check in. We don't know what those conversations are. We just know they were happening. This all took place in 2024, and we've been very casual about this. These people hate democracy. They don't want the people to decide. They want to decide who leads us. And once you start understanding that fundamental, I think a lot of things start making sense.
So I want to get back to Biden in these cases that you talk about in the book. But before I do that, I was thinking about what you were saying in terms of democracy as you were just replying to that. Over the weekend, over and over again, these Democrats from sanctuary, I keep saying this, the Texas Democrats have fled to political sanctuary cities in states that led the way in gerrymandering. And I'm watching J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, this weekend talk about attacks on democracy. And I can't believe Kristen Welker of NBC actually questioned him and said, but your state led the way in doing this. And he said, yeah, but this is about democracy. So it's about democracy when it's Texas getting 5 Republican seats. It's good when it's Illinois gerrymandering for Democrat seats, when Massachusetts gerrymanders for Democrat seats, when Maryland gerrymanders for Democratic seats. So, but no one calls them out. And that's, you know, to your point, they just use this refrain, attack on democracy, attack on democracy. Eric Holder used it. Barack Obama's attorney general, Barack Obama, keeps talking about it. None of them have a problem when they do it. I can't believe, though, and I you know, the word that comes to mind is chutzpah. Like, I'm like, how do you guys honestly look at yourself in the mirror and say, I'm not going to get called out on this?
Yeah, it is amazing that they can do this, but it's because they've got this ecosystem where they're constantly propped up in the media. They're treated like celebrities. They're given, the more they lie, the more likely it is they're going to get a lucrative cable news punditry contract from CNN or MSNBC and a big book deal from a major publisher. And so they've been rewarded for being dishonest. So their main characteristic that is valued in the Democrat Party is not honesty. Truth is not a value on the left in this country. What's a value is whether or not they can just basically put their head down and run into brick walls on behalf of their cause. And so those people who can do that with the most resilience are the ones who are rewarded. And so you just have to keep putting your head down and ramming through. And if you do that, then you're going to get rewarded. But I think the point about gerrymandering is so big. How are we supposed to drop these districts? It's who's going to do it. It's the people who win. They get to do it. That's democracy. So hello.
That's a great point. It actually is democracy. It's being done by people who got elected.
That's it. That's what we got. I guess it's being a republic, but it's like, if you want to be specific, we should.
You know what? Maybe I'm going to make a T-shirt. Gerrymandering is democracy.
I got 10%, but you can do the rest.
All right. Hey, I'll give you 10. You came up with it. That's not a bad finder's fee. But one of the things that I thought was interesting, I want to get back to what I mentioned a minute ago that you brought up in the book, is that the 6 Trump cases.
Yeah.
Okay, which in themselves, each one of them, you could go down like a total rabbit hole and say, like, okay, let's look at New York. The idea that no one, again, I always said, if you can hate Donald Trump as much as you want, but ask yourself with a straight face, do you think that conjuring up multiple misdemeanors that have expired in terms of the statute of limitations, creating a fake felony, and then telling the jury they don't need a reason to convict the guy, passes just the most basic set of jurisprudence? If it was anyone else, you'd laugh at it. But you write that all of those cases, the Georgia case, everything else, all ties back to Biden.
Yeah. And I'll go through that, but you must be living in my brain here, Sean, because I actually, last night I was drafting a piece recommending an investigation to Juan Merchan for the way the New York case was handled. There are two New York cases. There's a civil one with Tish James, who absolutely should be investigated, but also the criminal one with Juan Merchan, Alvin Bragg, Stormy Daniels, that case. And I just go through the absurdity of the legal arguments in that case. They're by far the worst of the 6 cases that I go into, and it's the only one that yielded a criminal conviction. And we need to start unpacking that. It's deeply unfair. There's not even 2 tiers of government in this country. There's 3 tiers. There's the normal tier. There's the James Clapper, John Brennan tier, where you break the law and then you get MSNBC contributorships. And then there's the Donald Trump one, where you do literally nothing and they try to jail you or they try to fine you hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, that is a 3rd tier that's beneath the rest of us. It's pretty unbelievable that went on. But yeah, I write that all these cases trace back to Biden, and a lot of it is take the Fani Willis case in Georgia. So RICO case, she put your boyfriend on the case. He's a family lawyer, Sean. He divorces and prenups. Why is he on a RICO case? There's no reason for this guy to be on a RICO case. Not only does he get on the case, they're making all this money together and they're spending it on vacations, the 2 of them. He's going to the White House. In what realm would this nobody family lawyer get 2 8-hour White House visits unless he was talking about coordinating with the Biden White House about the case? The Alvin Bragg case with Juan Merchan. The big tell here that there was rigging from the top. This guy named Matthew Colangelo, who's the number 3 guy in the DOJ. This guy was in a spot to be a cabinet secretary, a Supreme Court justice, an FBI director. This is a pristine resume type guy at the top of a 100,000 person bureaucracy. He goes down, takes a JV role in Alvin Bragg's Manhattan DA courtroom, the type of job you get straight out of law school if you can't get a better job. Why does he do this? Because he's in a witch hunt against Donald Trump. Obviously, he's going to liaison back to the White House. I want to know what those conversations were. I want to know what the conversation was when who approached the guy who's number 3 of the DOJ and says, you need to go down here with Alvin Bragg and Juan Merchan, and you need to go try to bag Trump. Crazy that happened, and we don't talk about it. The White House visit, okay, Reid Hoffman. He funded the LinkedIn billionaire. You guys have heard his name before. Funds every sort of left-wing outlet there is. Okay, he bankrolls the E. Jean Carroll case. The E. Jean Carroll case is the most ridiculous case you've ever read in your life. If you don't laugh, if you read my recounting of that, Sean, we don't have the same sense of humor. It's ridiculous, the stuff she laid out. She also got the best attorneys in the game to defend her, the best Me Too attorneys. How could she afford that as a columnist? Well, she was backed by a billionaire who was trying to destroy Trump on behalf of Joe Biden while he was going to the White House 5 times in 2022 alone. That's just 3 of the cases. Every single one of them has a connection like that. And we've been way too casual about this. This is a massive scandal, the biggest of the century, I believe, and no one's been held to account yet.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.